this video, we're ranking every single exotic weapon in Destiny 2 into a tier list for PvP. This is part 1 where we're looking at weapons that use primary ammo, and parts 2 and 3 ranking special and heavy ammo will be linked in the description. First up for the kinetic weapons in alphabetical order is the Ace of Spades. I've said it time and time again, and I'll gladly repeat myself for the views. For completeness sake. Ace of Spades is the best exotic PvP hand cannon in Destiny 2 as of Season of the Lost. It has every perk under the sun, and you can chain Memento Mori, making it deal even more damage than a 120 RPM hand cannon. It even keeps the radar up while you're aiming it, and it makes targets explode when you kill them with a headshot. What's not to like? There's not much more to say here, it's truly an S tier hand cannon. In my pulse rifle tier list, I ranked Bad Juju in the C tier. Unfortunately for the Juju, not much is going to be changing for that ranking. For those of you not in the loop, it has some awesome perks, but it occupies the worst possible damage model of the 450 RPM lightweight pulses. To add gasoline to the fire, it doesn't even give you a movement boost like the other lightweight frames. It's a fun choice if you can go on a streak and chain together the exotic perk String of Curses. The faster super regeneration is really nice, and any kills reload Bad Juju automatically. It can turn into a pretty decent streak machine, but at its base form, it's just a bad pulse rifle, albeit with some pretty good hipfire accuracy. Today's meta values primary gunplay more than ever, and having a bad primary will severely handicap you. That's why Bad Juju is going to land in the C tier. Back when I ranked auto rifles, I complained about the Cerberus +1 not being consistent enough for me to recommend it for most use cases, and I had a lot of people telling me that I needed to put more time into it. Well, I did, and maybe it's better than I initially gave it credit for, but not by much. This is basically a hybrid between an auto rifle and a shotgun, which is kind of bad at both roles. With amazing submachine guns like the Multimach and Sheriff's Wrath dominating in close quarters, the Cerberus is a really tough pick because you're often going to lose out in a duel against an SMG, or even a chaperone who's sliding in to close the gap. Meanwhile, at long ranges, it's pretty bad with a lot of damage drop off and bullet spread, so its only real pocket of usefulness is in the mid-range where it's going to lose out against better pulses, autos, and hand cannons. I guess I'll be fair and mention that the Cerberus is one of the best primary weapons for taking down glaciers and Titan barricades, but unfortunately that's pretty much where the usefulness ends. My recommendation is still to avoid the Cerberus in any kind of competitive situation, except if you're the one on the team who's in charge of breaking those crystals or barricades. We're going to go with the D tier for this four-headed dog. Crimson is a pulse rifle hand cannon hybrid with awesome perks and seemingly awesome stats, at least with a catalyst. It's also a weapon that feels quite different depending on your input device of choice. On mouse and keyboard, the burst will make Crimson kick up in front of your target, which makes it really difficult to aim since you can barely see what you're shooting at. On controller though, the reticle friction can do a lot of the heavy lifting for you, and you're going to appreciate the high leniency and forgiveness for trying to achieve that optimal time to kill. For both devices, the healing provided by getting a kill is awesome, and if you land a headshot kill, it's going to auto reload the magazine for you. This makes it great for going on some really long kill sprees. We've got to split our rankings here between the different input devices. Since there are simply much better choices out there for mouse and keyboard players, we're going to put Crimson in the C tier. On the other hand, for controller players, Crimson is an awesome A tier exotic that could potentially even go S tier for 6v6 play. Cryosthesia 77K is a stasis flavored sidearm in the kinetic slot. It has the damage model of a 260 RPM sidearm, meaning that it can kill in 3 headshots and 1 body shot for an optimal time to kill of 0.7 seconds. I have to say that I'm not generally a huge fan of the 260s since you can get faster kill times consistently with the other archetypes. Input device once again has a big impact on how sidearms feel in general. If you're using a controller, they can feel really nice and sticky, but on mouse and keyboard we typically have the same problem as Crimson where the weapon model jumps up in front of your target. Cryo on the other hand is quite an outlier in this regard. The recoil is pretty much vertical, smooth, and easy to correct. The sight is very crisp and not really obstructive, and this makes it one of the best sidearms for mouse and keyboard players. That's just in its base form before we even take a look at the exotic perk. Just take a look at this side-by-side recoil with the Lonesome, which is the same archetype of sidearm. Cryo's exotic perk activates after you get a kill and it gives you 10 seconds of an alternate fire mode. During this time frame, you can hold your fire button and charge one single linear fusion shot out, which will instantly freeze anyone it touches even across the map. This instant freeze can make for some insane clutch plays, and it synergizes with all the stasis subclasses. Shout out to my friend Cammy with the best cryo play that I've ever seen.
Damn,
dude.
melee range, holy
God. I'm laid out, I'm sorry, dude.
that was like,
The catch is that you gotta be quick because the freeze duration is only for a couple of seconds. In my playtesting, it was pretty common for me to freeze someone who would get away just before I could secure the kill. It's a lot of fun and quick play for the memes, but maybe not the most competitive option out there. We're gonna go C tier for this one. After all, it is a sidearm. Ah yes, the Dead Man's Tale. I'm betting that you've been killed by this scout rifle at least once in the past week if you're on PC. Let me explain how this one works. In its base form, it's technically a scout rifle, but it has 18 zoom, which is the same as your average pulse rifle. It also has a really nice iron sight, so it's very easy to aim. It fires at 120 RPM and it has a unique damage model. The long story short is that you need to land 2 headshots and 1 body shot to kill someone in its base form, and with something like an Empowering Rift, you can actually 2-tap a Guardian at any resilience level. The exotic perk on Dead Man's Tale will increase your damage for every headshot that you land. With the perk active, you can kill your enemy in 1 headshot and 2 body shots, or even 2-tap some enemies depending on how many stacks you have. Hold tight because you ain't seen nothing yet. Aside from the exotic perk, the Dead Man's Tale can be completely randomly rolled. This means you can get ricochet rounds for those cheeky kills behind walls, and in the third column you can even get Vorpal Weapon to 3-tap a super out of the sky. But wait, there's more! The Catalyst gives the Dead Man's Tale extremely consistent hipfire accuracy while increasing its rate of fire to 150 rounds per minute. This means that you can kill someone with 2 crits and 1 body shot quicker than even the Ace of Spades landing all 3 headshots. And that's while benefiting from the crazy strafe speed bonus and the radar awareness of hipfiring. Admittedly, the Dead Man's Tale did get its hipfire aim assist slightly nerfed, but in the hands of even a semi-competent player, it's extremely deadly. Even at base form, the Dead Man's Tale easily lands in the S tier, but if you can learn to tame the hipfire mode, you'll be rewarded with the strongest primary weapon in Destiny 2 right now. I recently reviewed Hawkmoon in my hand cannon tier list. It has amazing base stats, and it's the only other current exotic weapon in the game that can get random rolls. This means that you can get rangefinder or opening shot to massively extend the range. Its exotic perk grants stacks of paracausal charge for every headshot that you land or for every kill. On the final round, Hawkmoon unleashes all of the save stacks into one massive damage bullet. This means that you can one-shot your opponent if you have at least 6 stacks. Perhaps even more powerful is the ability to 2-tap with just 3 save stacks. This can set you up for an easy pick on a Guardian in Trials of Osiris, for example. I truly love this hand cannon. It's an easy pick for the A tier, and I could even see an argument for S tier when it's used in the right situations. Lumina is a hand cannon centered around being a really good teammate. Killing someone drops remnants, which load noble rounds into Lumina, and you get a second one if you have the Catalyst. You can hipfire these orbs to heal your teammates and provide a damage boost for both of you. I explained how Lumina can be really awesome for a coordinated team in my hand cannon tier list. In short, it can buff your teammates to do more damage and kill your opponent a little bit easier. This can be devastating for your enemies, especially if your opponents have limited special ammo. This even works with the Warlock exotic Boots of the Assembler to give that noble rounds buff to your teammates for free. As a solo player, I think the Lumina lands in the B tier for its mediocre stats, but don't sleep on it in a team scenario. Your friends will thank you. When used correctly, it can be ranked very highly, maybe even S tier. Malfeasance is an exotic 180 RPM hand cannon with a very unique exotic perk. Landing just 5 shots on your enemy will make them explode for a lot of damage. In practice, this means that the Malfeasance is pretty good at killing roaming supers or burning through any kind of overshield or damage resistance. This includes annoying things like those stag warlock campers. It's also pretty decent at killing players at scout rifle range since the explosion effect doesn't suffer from any damage drop off over range. What holds it back the most is the 180 RPM frame with a mediocre kill time, which is why it lands in the C tier. But if used against particular setups like against stag warlocks, you could rank it a little bit higher. The MIDA multi-tool is a kinetic 200 RPM scout rifle. Its most important perk actually isn't stated anywhere on the inspection screen. MIDA comes with 100 aim assist. Not too long ago, scout rifles got a buff to their aim assist cones, which means that the MIDA will give you one of the easiest times landing shots against opponents at long ranges. Its exotic perk keeps your radar active while aiming down sights, and the scope also highlights your opponents. It also gets some great movement speed buffs which will have you flying around the map. One thing that often goes unnoticed about the MIDA is that the flinch output is actually insane. If you can keep landing your shots, you'll likely flinch your opponent off of their shot. This is all fun and games until the Dead Man's Tale shows up and hipfires you to death. The sad reality of traditional scout rifles is that most Destiny 2 maps just simply aren't built for them, and despite MIDA being an awesome scout, it's just hard to rank it much higher than the B tier. Monte Carlo is a kinetic 600 RPM auto rifle. It's a simple one. It comes with good stats, an exotic version of Swashbuckler, and it refunds melee energy on hit. It also has a sweet blade on the front, which unfortunately can't be used in-game to stab your enemies. If you get a kill, it has a chance to refund your entire melee ability. Also, any melee kill will instantly buff it up to the maximum damage potential with its exotic perk Markov Chain. It's actually really that simple. It's a good auto rifle, it pairs nicely with melee builds, but it's just not going to outduel the higher ranked weapons on this list too often. That's why we're going to put it in the B tier. It's a solid choice, but it has a little bit of trouble against the more meta options. In my pulse rifle tier list, I ranked No Time to Explain in the S tier, and honestly, I might have even underrated it considering the new meta that's evolved thanks to this helmet. You know how almost every warlock lately refuses to ever leave their rift? Well, that's because they're getting damage resistance from the stag. Even if they aren't wearing this helmet, there's also the Whisper of Chains. What are you going to do against all that damage resist? Well, one good answer is to equip No Time to Explain. Hear me out. No Time's exotic perk collects stacks for every headshot that you land. These don't go away if you switch weapons or if you take time out of the gunfight. The stacks are yours to keep. When you reach 10 of them, No Time summons a hyped up version of the Arc Buddy to shoot alongside you. This little guy will snipe your enemies from some incredible range and will help you land that 2 burst much easier. It's just mind-boggling how quickly you can delete someone's health if you have the perk active. If your enemy is willing to chill around and let you collect stacks while they sit in a rift, you'll eventually get No Time's perk active and you're going to be able to melt them right out of their damage resist. If you ever feel like you're helpless against a stag, just put on No Time and patiently collect those stacks. You're not going to be disappointed. We're going to go S tier for this awesome pulse rifle. Outbreak Perfected is yet another pulse rifle which belongs to the 450 RPM damage model. Again, this is really strict on your accuracy as you have to land 8 straight headshots to get the same time to kill as just landing 3 headshots with a 140 RPM hand cannon. This is no doubt a harder feat to pull off without really any added reward. Fortunately, Outbreak has a few things to help you achieve this. It's actually the only pulse rifle that has dynamic sway reduction as a hidden perk. In-game, this makes your recoil almost non-existent as you continue to fire. The sights are pretty clean as well, especially with the Matter Scourge ornament. The Siva nanites generated from hits and precision kills can help cut down roaming supers a little bit faster, but otherwise they don't really play a big role in PvP unless your enemies really like to bunch up together. Sadly, just having regular damage perks here would probably be more helpful. It's a nice weapon to shoot, but it lacks a little bit of lethality, so we're going to rank it in the C tier. Rat King is a sidearm that gets exponentially better depending on how many teammates use it with you. The intrinsic perk Rat Pack allows it to fire much faster when you're near allies who are also using it. How much faster? Well, a lot. It also grants you a brief period of invisibility when you get a kill and then reload. If you're playing against a full team of players using the Rat King, things get really frustrating. The rate of fire when Rat King is firing at full speed is scary fast, and you can get absolutely melted. The exotic catalyst also grants additional aim assist and recoil direction and triggers health regen when you reload after a kill. It's a decent weapon for solo play, especially with the catalyst, but nothing too crazy. I would say it's worthy of a spot in the C tier. In a 6-stack team full of rats though, this is probably B or even A tier. It's definitely a lot of fun. Sturm is a 120 RPM hand cannon in the kinetic slot. You should think about Sturm as a basic, well-rounded hand cannon with the special ability to benefit from its sidearm pairing, Drang. Its exotic perk will give you 1 overcharge shot every time you get a kill with the Drang. Before you ask, yes, it does allow the Sturm to 2-tap. Is that a good thing? Well, sure it is, but you can also do the same thing with a kill clip Loud Lullaby without being required to use a sidearm. It has a large magazine and some pretty solid stats for a 120 with the catalyst unlocked, but it's really just not all that special these days after all of the nerfs to the high impact hand cannons. Unless you're getting a lot of kills with Drang, it's really just a basic hand cannon with nice stats, so we're going to put it in the B tier. The Suros Regime is a really unique exotic auto rifle which even lets you customize its intrinsic perk by altering the rate of fire. I'd suggest that you stay away from dual speed receiver as that one actually reduces the Suros lethality a bit. In a This Week at Bungie update that happened after I started this recording, Bungie also announced that the dual speed receiver mode is now going to grant plus 30 range and plus 3 zoom. On paper, this could actually make it kind of a sniper rifle, but it still won't kill quite as fast as our other option on the table. Spinning up on the other hand will significantly increase the rate of fire while holding down the trigger. If you pre-fire your enemies correctly, you can get some absolutely crazy kill times and delete your enemies before they know what hit them. The lethality is also paired with a clean aesthetic, some awesome base stats, and a chance to return health on kill. The catalyst will bump up your recoil direction to 100 and it also improves that chance of health recovery to proc. It's a very solid auto rifle, but autos just really aren't the strongest options in the current meta, especially with the buffed up Vex Mythoclast in the picture, which is pretty much beating every other auto in every way. So we're going to put the Suros in the B tier. Up next is the sweet business. Honestly, I don't know how this thing isn't meta. It has all the usual things about a meta weapon. It looks good, it kills fast, it never runs out of ammo, and most importantly, it only requires using one button. Unfortunately, Sweet Business isn't quite as good as it looks. It does way too little damage at base, and by the time you get it ramped up to maximum rate of fire, everyone's going to know that you're coming. In my auto rifle tier list, the Actium Warrig Sweet Business Defenders rallied behind it in the comments, but honestly, I feel like even with the setup, it's just not going to perform all that well in higher level games. There's simply way too many ways to kill someone who's trying to ramp up their sweet business. Also, while you're shooting, you're super immobile and the hipfire accuracy is just not all that great. So I'm still going to be putting this bad boy in the F tier. The last word is Destiny's cowboy-inspired hand cannon. It's meant to be fired from the hip and it shoots extremely fast at 225 RPM. If you land 3 headshots, you'll be rewarded with one of the fastest base time to kills in Destiny 2. This allows you to keep your full field of view and radar up while you're gunning down your opponents. Unfortunately, the last word's ease of use is highly dependent on what input device you use. The weapon is custom coded to be more magnetic on controller. Together with the friction and stickiness that controller players experience, this makes the last word a menacing S tier hand cannon in the Crucible. On mouse and keyboard, however, this makes the last word extremely difficult to use. I'm not sure if it's really even worth learning to use the last word when the Dead Man's Tale is already so good and it works perfectly fine in close range. It's doable for sure, and it's a lot of fun to watch yourself progress as a player. If you're landing your shots, it's because your aim is good, not just because of some bullet magnetism. And the time to kill when you get the hang of it is just crazy. I'm going to rank it in the B tier for mouse and keyboard. I recently interviewed my friend Cool Cheese, who just happens to be a god with SMGs, and here's what he had to say about the Huckleberry.
Huckleberry is bad, stop lying to yourself, it is not good. Tarrabah is a better gun in every single way.
Why? Well, because the Huckleberry's range is really bad. For a submachine gun, more range equals good, and unfortunately the Huckleberry just doesn't hit very far. Also, its base reload speed, which Cool Cheese considers to be the second most important stat, is really bad. Sure, if you keep chaining kills you don't need to reload, but with the awful range, you're probably going to die to a chaperone ape anyway. For PvP, I'm going to put it in the C tier, but don't forget about the Huckleberry in PvE. Remember that the Huckleberry is the only weapon in the game which never had its version of Rampage get nerfed. This means you're going to get some extra bonus damage compared to other Rampage weapons. The Jade Rabbit is an exotic scout rifle with a really cute bunny on it. It belongs to the 150 RPM archetype, meaning that it can secure a kill in just 3 headshots faster than a hand cannon like the Ace of Spades. The exotic perk, Fate of All Fools, ramps up headshot damage by chaining body shots. Unfortunately though, the Jade Rabbit deals abysmally low body shot damage, so you're better off just going for headshots in the first place. And let's be real here, the Jade Rabbit basically gives away headshots for free. It has a very clean scope which highlights enemies, and it also comes with a lot of aim assist. If you remember when I talked about the MIDA, I said that aim assist on scout rifles is really important and that it can make or break a scout rifle. Jade is a really awesome scout rifle, but it's also just not the Dead Man's Tale, so it's not that great at competing in close quarters. And Destiny maps don't really reward the benefits of a scout rifle right now. This rabbit unfortunately isn't worth using in today's meta despite being a really good scout, so it's going to go into the B tier. The Traveler's Chosen is the kinetic 300 RPM sidearm with really nice stats. It's one of the longer range traditional sidearms of the game, which unfortunately doesn't really mean that much since its range doesn't really compete with high-end SMGs. The Catalyst gives it Osmosis, which is next to worthless for PvP outside of some extreme fringe cases, and Full Auto Trigger, which provides some extra convenience when laying on the trigger. The exotic perk on the sidearm gives you 3 stacks of Gathering Light on every kill. These directly increase the aim assist and handling. If you hold the reload button, you can consume all of those stacks for a massive boost to your ability cooldown. These perks are really awesome and they make for so many fun and toxic builds. But like a few other weapons on this list, your input device of choice greatly determines how easy this thing feels to use. Look at this side by side of the Cryosthesia, which we covered a few entries ago, and the Traveler's Chosen. The recoil makes it really hard to see your enemy when you're dueling them. For mouse and keyboard players, this is a big problem since we don't get that reticle friction. That's why the Traveler's Chosen is going into the D tier for mouse and keyboard, and potentially B tier for controller players. Maybe even A tier with the right build that really makes great use of the ability spam. I recently did a full breakdown on the Thorn vs Hawkmoon, so I'll be quick in this one and link to that video in the comments. Thorn is awesome at stopping aggressive players. Their burn damage can keep them out of a fight temporarily while their health is returning, and it can even prevent a res in trials. The exotic perk creates remnants on kill that track towards you. When you pick one up, it refills some bullets into your magazine and greatly buffs the damage over time effect. This can allow you to go on some nasty sprees in the Crucible if you keep picking up those remnants. The main downside is the less than ideal stats, especially looking at that low range stat in particular. I really love using this hand cannon, but I just can't quite justify putting it in the S tier thanks to the poor range, so we're going to place it in the A tier. The Vigilance Wing is a very unique 5-round burst pulse rifle, and it's a tough one to rank. If you don't have the Vigil of Saint 14 ornament, oof, that's really hard to see what you're looking at. But if you open up your wallet and buy this sweet ornament, then you get a really nice clean and open sight. Honestly, this one's bordering on pay to win. In general, the Vigilance Wing is just such a nice gun to use. You get a 2-round burst that can kill in just 5 headshots and 5 body shots for a really decent and forgiving optimal time to kill. This gun just has tremendous damage output. Additionally, the exotic perk will give you health and many other benefits when your teammates die, but these really aren't that important compared to the massive burst damage of the Vigilance Wing. It's an S tier weapon assuming you have the right ornament, no doubt about it. The Wishender is a bow that ranks very differently depending on how you use it. Let me explain. By aiming down sights for a sec, this bow gives you wall hacks on demand with no ability usage required. How crazy is that? In regular 6v6, it's fun to use, but probably not all that groundbreaking. Where it really shines though is thanks to a recent change in Trials of Osiris. This season we lost the ability to carry over our special ammo between rounds, and you also no longer get free ammo from being revived. This means that the idea of using the Wishender as a swappable option for your sniper rifle is very attractive, especially when you run out of ammo in a round that's lasting a very long time. Even as just a basic bow, the Wishender can land some big damage on enemies who peek around a corner. And since it's a primary weapon, it never runs out of ammo. The real benefit though is knowing your opponent's exact location and where they're moving. This can turn you into a call-out god for your team. For general Crucible play, I'm going to put it in the C tier, but with a note that if used in trials as a swappable, it can be very powerful and definitely be ranked a bit higher. Okay, those were all of the kinetic exotics, so here's a quick break for you to restock on some popcorn before we dive into the energy exotic primaries. And time's up. Time to go. Remember how we talked about the Cryosthesia and the laser beam recoil? Well, Devil's Ruin is kind of a different type of laser. On the one hand, its stability is really nice for mouse and keyboard players in particular since it doesn't bounce on your way too much like the other sidearms. On the other hand, it turns into an actual laser. Holding down your fire button will charge a baby version of 1000 voices which has the potential to melt your opponent. Keep in mind that this beam also has significantly more range than the sidearm itself, and if you have good tracking aim, you can make some Guardian toast. My friend Wallet said it's like having a heavy weapon, but I wouldn't go that far. It's still a sidearm and it's limited to a range where you have to constantly fear the chaperone. That's why it's going to go in the B tier. Fighting Lion is perhaps the most unique weapon on this list, and that makes it really hard to rank. It's a grenade launcher that decided it didn't want to be confined to the special or heavy ammo slots. Instead, it said screw that and proceeded to eat primary ammo. When Bungie recently changed primary ammo to be infinite, they heavily nerfed the Lion's reload speed. This was a good move because before that, people would sit behind corners and spam away shots endlessly. Clearly, this was very annoying and it just had to go. Now, at base, the reload speed is really slow, but there are still ways to fix it and it just requires a little bit more investment. If we look a little deeper, there's an intrinsic perk which will give you back some reload speed on multiple consecutive hits. Soon, Bungie's going to change this to only require one hit and also improve the buff to the reload speed. Also, the Lion's Catalyst actually gives you a healthy chunk of reload speed. While it might not look like much, it's actually a big improvement over the base. And don't forget about the perk Chimera. After the Lion fires, your other weapons get bonus handling and accuracy. This synergizes extremely well with a sniper rifle to give you some easy cleanup kills. This combo is known in the community as Snipe Lion, and it was pioneered mostly by my friend Pattycakes. It relies heavily on you knowing the angles to ricochet grenades around to get chip damage on your opponents. This combo is extremely strong, probably more than you realize. Just spend an afternoon watching a player like Cammy abuse its power. We're going to put this one in the A tier. Graviton Lance is a unique pulse rifle that fires a burst of just 2 bullets. The first one is a tiny shot and the second one rips a hole through space-time with no damage fall off. Back in year 1, this gun was actually at the top of the meta. Unfortunately for Grav Lance though, most of the other primary weapons have had their time to kill decreased while Graviton's was left behind. Today it has an awful time to kill whether you're hitting all headshots or all body shots. The lack of damage fall off on the second bullet is nice, and the ability to kill nearby enemies with the mini Nova bombs generated from each kill are definitely cool, but the slow time to kill really holds it back. Despite the amazingly cool design and nostalgia factor, I just can't justify putting it any higher than the D tier, and that's probably being generous. Hardlight is a 600 RPM auto rifle which can actually switch flavors. If you're playing against me, let me know that you've watched this video by switching it over to the Arc mode. That way I can throw on my Riskrunner. In all seriousness, please don't play the Arc mode. The Void mode can synergize with the Nezarec Sin exotic, and the Solar mode works wonders with the Path of the Burning Steps. Hardlight's exotic perk gives it less total damage drop off at extreme ranges. It's also extremely stable and easy to use, making it one of the better 600 RPM auto rifles in the game. Beyond this, it gives bonus points for being able to damage your enemies behind walls thanks to the ricochet rounds. As fun as it is role-playing Hanzo with some simple geometry, I have to rank this one in the B tier. That's mostly because auto rifles just aren't that strong in the current meta, unless your name is Vex Mythoclast. Land Monarque is a bow that deals poison damage from a perfectly drawn shot. If you headshot someone after activating the perk, you'll get them for full damage of the arrow plus some additional poison damage, which also spreads to nearby enemies. This tiny bit of extra damage is enough to one-shot your opponent if you headshot them from an Empowering Rift. This is really strong, and it's one of the main reasons I'll rank Monarque pretty highly. It can be really annoying to play against, but don't think that you're helpless against the one-shot Monarque team. Any type of damage resistance or overshield will let you survive that headshot. The real threat here though are the bow swappers who hit you with a perfectly drawn arrow and then swap to a hand cannon to finish you off. This is an oppressive playstyle that's really tough to counter. It's a very effective bow and very annoying in the current sandbox, and it's going into the A tier. Polaris Lance is a 150 RPM solar scout rifle. Its exotic perk activates after you land 4 headshots and it loads a burning shot, the perfect 5th. Shout out to my fellow music nerds watching. This has a lot of nice synergies with subclass intrinsic perks like Sunspots, playing with fire on a Blade Barrage, or the exploding burn melee on Bottom Tree Dawnblade. Unfortunately, it lacks in the most critical stat department for a scout rifle, aim assist. Because of this, it's more difficult to land your 3 headshots compared to other options like the Jade Rabbit. You have to be really on point here because the body shot damage is abysmally low. Landing the perfect 5th shot is incredibly satisfying, especially when you get that burnout kill from the grave. But in today's sandbox, it's just not that competitive. That's why it's going to go in the D tier. Look at this SMG, it's another hard counter to Arc Buddies on the Bottom Tree Stormcaller. The Riskrunner is the last remaining member of the adaptive 900 RPM family of submachine guns, and its exotic perk gives it bonus damage plus a lot of bullets whenever the user is struck by arc damage. If your opponent is so kind to pop their Arc Buddies, you can basically guarantee that you'll have an absolute melt ready for every engagement. If you're stuck in a nasty situation against someone relying on arc ability spam, put on this SMG and go to town. While the Riskrunner perk is active, it also chains lightning to other enemies, making it really easy to go for a team wipe. Unfortunately, Riskrunner in its base form is a pretty weak SMG, mostly because it lacks effective range. Yes, the catalyst bumps up that range bar pretty high, but the thing that just kills it is the hidden 13 zoom stat. If you didn't know, this works like a multiplier on top of the range stat to determine the actual damage drop off in the game. I'll put it in the C tier for general play with the note that it can be a really great pick against any arc-centric builds. Skyburner's Oath is basically the U-tune version of scout rifles. While hip firing, it fires tiny grenades at 200 RPM. This can be hilarious against beginners since they'll be baffled trying to dodge the grenades. Unfortunately though, any good player is going to be able to consistently dodge these, making the Skyburners quite obsolete. If you aim down sights, Skyburners becomes a basic 150 RPM scout rifle with explosive payload. This kinda works, but would you really give up an exotic slot to get a basic 150 RPM scout rifle? In my opinion, no, you probably shouldn't. It's fun to use, but not really that effective. Skyburner's Oath goes into the F tier. While we're speaking about small fireballs, here's an actually good fire-breathing exotic, the Sunshot. It's the only survivor of the 150 RPM hand cannon conversion, meaning that it keeps that slightly faster 0.8 second time to kill. I recently explained Sunshot in more detail in my hand cannon tier list, but my main complaint about the Sunshot are all those fiery visual effects. I'm supposed to be flinching my opponent, not myself. On the upside, it has explosive payload, makes enemies explode when you kill them, and has some great stats with the catalyst. If it were a bit easier to land than optimal time to kill, I'd be all for it, but I have to rank it in the B tier for now. Symmetry is a 260 RPM rapid fire scout rifle in the energy slot. It's yet another awesome weapon that you can equip if your enemy plans on playing really passively against you. Let me explain how this works. Symmetry has 2 firing modes, a basic rapid fire scout mode and an alternate slower firing mode which fires seeking projectiles. At base, it's way better to use the default mode because the seekers don't deal much damage. However, by landing precision hits with Symmetry, you get stacks of dynamic charge. The more stacks you have, the higher damage you deal after you switch to the alternate mode. If you get at least 7 stacks, you'll be able to 2-tap your opponents. Unfortunately though, even if you go all the way up to 20 stacks, you're not going to be able to one-shot anyone. Still, the 2-tap is really dangerous because it comes quickly and it will seek out your enemies. This means that you can punish people who let you collect a lot of headshots with an absolutely devastating long-range 2-tap. The unfortunate reality of Symmetry though is that the Dead Man's Tale can already 2-tap if you get just 3 headshots or if you sit in an Empowering Rift. Also, against a really passive team, you're probably better off collecting headshots with a Hawkmoon for an actual one-shot kill. Pro tip by the way, use a hand cannon holster mod if you can't land your Hawkmoon shots. Despite being really fun, it's just not the best scout rifle option these days, which is why I'm going to rank Symmetry in the C tier. While we're on the topic of punishing more passive players, here's a weapon that actually does that really well. Tarrabah is a 750 RPM submachine gun with decent stats and pretty good range. Its exotic perk gets charged whenever you deal damage or receive damage. Notice that this is yet another perk which doesn't rely on you getting kills, just hits. Beware though, Tarrabah will actually remove all of your progress if you switch off of it. However, that's probably a good thing because when Tarrabah's exotic perk Ravenous Beast is charged, it's just game over for your opponents. With Ravenous Beast activated, Tarrabah has an insanely fast time to kill, yet there's just no surviving that. I'll rank Tarrabah in the A tier with a note that if they ever change the swapping limitation on the perk progress, this thing is going straight to the S tier. Tommy's Matchbook is the Tommy gun of Destiny 2. I already introduced you to my little friend a couple months ago in a separate video. If you aren't up to speed though, Tommy's is one of the best auto rifles in the game because it secretly has almost perfect hipfire accuracy. This allows you to make some crazy plays while keeping your radar open and remaining very mobile. If you hold down the trigger, Tommy's exotic perk will kick in, which increases the outgoing damage but also slowly burns you. This can make for some clutch plays if you can manage to burn your opponents in a 1vx situation. Back then in my other video, I talked really highly of the Matchbook, but it pains me to say it, the Vex Mythoclast has definitely taken Tommy's spot. It's still a good auto rifle, but it just can't compare to the sheer damage output and the one-shot ability of the Mythoclast. So I'm going to rank it in the B tier. Ticcu's Divination is a bow that comes pre-packaged with its very own aimbot hacks. Look, it even has those red boxes. Seriously, if you get someone locked on, it's hard to miss. So you'd think that an exotic that does all the aiming work for you would be great, right? Well, there's a catch. The aimbot only works in hipfire mode. These weaker arrows only do 27 damage in total, which most Guardians won't even notice. To make those arrows do anything, you're going to need to hit your opponent another time while aiming down sights. Unfortunately, unless you've paid for a different monthly subscription, you're not going to get the same red boxes this time. At this point, you might as well just use a legendary bow with a way better accuracy stat and more meaningful perks. The upside is that if you do land that second arrow, you can create quite an explosion. Ticcu's is an awesome perk for PvE, but this is a tier list evaluating exotics for PvP, so it's going to go in the D tier. Trinity Ghoul is an arc bow that shoots 3 arrows at once. Cool in theory, but maybe not the easiest thing to pull off in real life. It also has some big limitations in Destiny 2. All of those arrows only deal a third of the normal damage, which can be a real pain if you're trying to quickly get the maximum possible damage output on your opponent. The exotic perk Lightning Rod makes arrows chain electricity to nearby enemies like, well, a lightning rod. The catalyst here is a huge upgrade because with any arc kill, it activates a lightning rod perk for your next shot. Again, this sounds way better on paper than it is in game. You can't really use your heavy weapon because you need the bow to be equipped when you get that arc kill, so you're limited to either a charge melee or a grenade. The upside is that if you get the perk rolling, you can do some hilarious things in 6v6 modes. It's one of those weapons that just creates some crazy kill streaks when the lightning rod is doing its thing. Trinity is clearly an amazing pick for PvE, but especially in 3v3 modes of PvP, you're probably better off with a different weapon. So we're going to put this one in the C tier. And finally, we have the Vex Mythoclast. Do I even need to say anything? Isn't the background gameplay clear enough? Okay, fine. The Mythoclast is a 390 RPM fusion rifle that fires more like an auto rifle. It has the damage model of a 360 auto, but at a faster fire rate, has more aim assist, better recoil direction, and essentially a beefed up exotic version of both Rampage and Heating Up from the Catalyst. At the time of this recording, earning just 2 kills will allow you to activate the linear fusion mode. Here you get 3 incredibly powerful shots, each of which can one-shot headshot a roaming super. It's been such a hot gun in the Crucible that Bungie actually just announced some changes to dial it back a bit. After the patch, it'll require 3 kills to turn on the LFR mode, the aim assist is getting nerfed globally, and the LFR mode specifically is getting another nerf regarding the aim assist cones. In its current state, the Mythoclast has single-handedly made all other auto rifles feel completely obsolete, and it's certainly going to land in the S tier at least until the patch becomes active. Even afterwards, I think this gun is still going to be very strong in the sandbox. If you don't have the Mythoclast, you're missing out, and I'm crossing my fingers that you get it during your next Vault of Glass run. Thank you so much for watching my tier list. This one took a lot of time to make. If you want to support projects like this one, you can join my Patreon. The link is patreon.com/pattycakesgg. We have a lot of cool things in there like map guides for Trials of Osiris and special access in my Discord. I'm wondering what video you might want to watch next. On screen is both my prediction and the prediction of the algorithm. Who do you think is the better predictor, human or machine? If you'd like to support mankind, maybe drop a like and a sub. It definitely helps me out and you can always change your mind later.